somebody who doesn't normally. Excellent. So I don't normally man the boards. I've normally have my my EA. She's just had to zip out really quickly. So her fantastic partner is joining us to man and let everybody in as they come through into this webinar. And before we get started, let me just do a couple of quick things here. And what I will ask is please pop yourselves on mute during the course of the webinar. If you have a question for our wonderful panelists, please pop that in the chat and we will get to your questions as we go. We usually leave time at the end, but if I do see a question that I think is pertinent to that particular question or that particular response, I will actually call that out. And at the end of the question time with the panelists, there will be time for you to actually physically ask them questions if you haven't already popped it into the chat. So I'm going to get us started and share my screen. Can you all see the Women for STEM proudly presents recruiting male allies? Fantastic. Thank you so much. As we always do when we do this particular webinars, we always do an acknowledgement of country. So we respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands with which we meet, the ancestors, elders, and communities of the Kulin Nation who've cared for this country for countless generations. We honour their enduring connection to land, waters, skies, and knowledge systems, and pay our respects to their resilience, wisdom, and culture, which continue to thrive. As we come together to learn, share, and create, we recognise that these lands have long been places of deep cultural exchange, ceremony, and storytelling. We are privileged to walk in the footsteps of the world's oldest continuous cultures. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the original scientists, engineers, land stewards, and knowledge holders of this continent. Their sophisticated understandings of the environment, sustainability, food systems, and innovation continue to inform and enrich all sectors. Yet, despite this profound legacy, First Nations voices remain underrepresented across many fields. It is essential that we listen with humility, learn with intent, and act with integrity, ensuring Indigenous knowledge is not only acknowledged, but meaningfully integrated and respected in how we teach, work, and lead. Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit more about Women for STEM. If you don't know about us or are not a member of our organisation and have just stumbled upon this particular webinar, we are so privileged to welcome you to this event. Within Women for STEM, we support women throughout their career life cycles in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and maths. We do this through 4 main phases with 5 main programs that underpin what we do. We attract, and that is using our Go Girl Go for IT program, which is a once every 2 years event that is run at Deakin University. We get over 2,000 students from Victoria, both metropolitan and regional students, and they come in for a day, a huge conference around STEM that is taking place on the 13th of August. If you've not heard of it, not volunteered, and want to know more, please reach out to us on our website, womenforstem.com.au. Then we have our Grad Girls program, which is where we enable women that are at university to meet and become members in an industry or the industry vertical of their choice. Followed by that, we have our Retain programs, What's Hot in Technology, 3 to 4 main events that we run during the year, a mini conference in a couple of hours, we like to say, with an opening and closing keynote, panelists, as well as roundtable speakers. We have a What's Hot event coming up in July, so please do check that out on our website. It is for innovation and founders, so it's going to be a very interesting topics. And then we have our Importance of Women program, which looks at supporting women once they're in the workforce, looking at those subjects and those keynotes that they would like to hear that will really help propel them in their careers and their career journeys, followed by our Mentor She program, which will help every woman that joins that program to accelerate in their career. So that is Women for STEM. I will go into that a little bit more when we finish at the end of the program. So let me introduce our amazing panelists. They're great photos, guys. Actually, I have to say, most enjoyable. I liked those. So let me introduce you to Amit Singhania. Amit is a leading strategic partner to companies around the world, leveraging technology to enable business transformation. Amit has spent over 2 decades building high impact sales teams and trusted client relationships. Growing up in India, Amit holds a Bachelor of Civil Engineering and an MBA in Marketing. Amit has worked in multiple countries with the last 15 plus years in Australia. He has excellent commercial and analytical skills and thrives in innovative and challenging environments. Amit is a board member at Women for STEM and a member of AICD. Throughout his career, Amit has built highly diverse teams and strongly believes the value diversity brings to any team. Amit spends his spare time cooking, reading, and finding any excuse to travel when possible. Welcome, Amit. Thank you. Ziffer Soni, or Sony as we are calling him, Sony is the Senior Practice Director, Software Engineering, Data and Business Transformation with Robert Half, another proud sponsor of Women for STEM. Sony is the Senior Practice Director at Robert Half, specialising in delivering high-impact contracting resources and consulting services that help clients accelerate digital and operational change. At Robert Half, Sony oversees project teams, bringing together deep capability across software engineering, data, and business transformation. He works closely with clients to understand complex challenges and provides tailored talent and consulting solutions that drive measurable outcomes. With a strong foundation in team leadership, commercial strategy, and technical talent delivery, Sony is known for building scalable practices that align with client goals while fostering a culture of trust, performance, and innovation. Welcome, Sony.
Thank you for having me.
And Ray Monday, Senior Manager Vehicle Evaluation and Regulations at Toyota Motor Corporation Australia, another proud sponsor of Women for STEM. Ray is a Senior Manager of Vehicle Evaluation and Regulations, Product Planning and Development Division, Toyota Australia. He leads a team of approximately 40 people, mostly in STEM fields. He's been at Toyota for 16 years and is the automotive engineering field in the automotive engineering field for 27 years. As part of his role, he has led the DEIB team within his division for the last 3 years. He considers himself to be an inclusive manager, but a deep discussion with one of his female colleagues a few years ago showed that there were inherent biases in his behavior and work practices. So he's taken positive actions to reduce biases in the hiring process, day-to-day work operations, and career development. He now has approximately 20% women in STEM roles within his team. The ultimate goal is to integrate these actions into standard work practices, and he hopes to be able to share his experiences on this webinar. So thank you so much, Ray.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
Don't feel so bad about bias. We all have them. It's just keeping them in check. Yes. So a little bit of webinar housekeeping for everybody, please. I am going to stop sharing my screen now, just so that you are aware when that goes away, so that we can actually have a lovely conversation without bombarding you with PowerPoint. I know we don't want death by PowerPoint on this for this conversation. So some of the housekeeping rules: please keep your phones on silent. I am aware that some of you may get a phone call during the time, so please feel free to take that. But if you're on silent, it's much better for everyone else. Please have your microphone headset on mute during the presentation. There will be time for questions at the end, but please use the chat function to write these down. So if we miss any questions, we can respond later. All right, we are recording this for anybody that came on later, and we'd love it if you would put your cameras on so we can see you. The worst thing for panelists is to be speaking to the little dots. So please do put your cameras on. Don't worry, we don't bite. Well, I mean, I think, Sony, you popped your little puppy away and I've got my pussycat in the back, and none of us bite really. So we'd love to see your faces. Fantastic. Right. Well, I'm going to get right into this because this is a topic very close to my heart. One of the reasons we chose this topic originally at the beginning of this year was that a lot of our members have asked, I mean, it's great if you want to get a sponsor, Mary Beth, it's great to get a mentor, but how do I form allyship with male allies? Because we all know that having male allies, certainly in underrepresented organizations and industries, really going to help us propel our careers forward. So this was so important and very close to my heart. Most of the men that in my network have really helped me with my career, and that allyship has stood me in great stead. So let me ask, and this is going to be to all of my panelists, but we'll start with you, Amit, followed by you, Sony, then followed by you, Ray. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you're so passionate about this subject? Over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Marybeth. Hi, everyone. So Amit Singhani, I've, like Marybeth said, spent the last 18 odd years in Australia, a couple of years in Bangkok before that in my career, and grew up in India. Uh, this subject's very close to my heart because of having seen the way it has evolved over the last four generations that I've been a part of, right from my grandmother growing up, uh, while I was growing up in a small town in India, to my mother and my parents, who were the first almost graduates in our entire family, and therefore moved in a city vis-a-vis a town, uh, to their cousins who kind of remained in the town, then to my wife and I, MBA, studied together, and we came to Australia almost immediately after. My son and his girlfriend, who were born here, and so I've seen those four generations. I lead large teams at work. Uh, we realize and proactively understand the impact it brings to the workplace, to the culture, to the results of what we are trying to achieve at work when we have equal representation of men and women in all teams. And we have seen that, we understand that, but we also then appreciate the challenges that stop that from happening and how we have to work around them. Uh, having lived it, having seen the huge change from the four generations, the change from India to Bangkok to Australia, just makes it deeply personal for me. And I really want to continue to help women, but also help organizations and families really bridge that gap.
Thank you, Amit. And having met you when you were with Capgemini, and just how passionate you are, and on our board. So I'm so
Yes.
grateful for that. Really important. Sony.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Thanks for that, Amit. That was really nice. It's an honor being a part of this conversation. And a little bit about myself. So I hail from India as well, similar to Amit. I grew up in Mumbai, so first 18 years of my life were spent in the city of Mumbai. I moved to the UK when I was 18 for about 4.5 years for my bachelor's degree, and then about a decade or so ago, I moved here to Australia, and I've been here since in Melbourne, and Melbourne's home now. Um, I think this topic is very close to my heart because of what I have seen growing up. So even though I've been away from home for almost 16 odd years now, the Indian culture is still a very big part of who I am. In my household growing up, like many others in India, Amit would attest to this, women typically took on traditional roles. They cooked, they looked after children, they managed the household and often cared for the elderly, whereas men in my household were the providers, if you will, from a monetary perspective, is what we saw them as. And that was no different in my household. And I grew up seeing my mum. So obviously, before my time, when she got married, she came into the Sony household, if you will. She used to work before she came into the household. She was, I wouldn't say made to stop, but that was expected of her. So she stopped working to look after myself, as I was born very quickly after their marriage, and the grandparents. So my dad's parents. And also some cousins in the house. So we're a joint family living in the apartments of Mumbai, if you will. And what was interesting at the time for me is my mum, you know, for nearly 30 years, looked after, every single meal, medication for my grandparents to a point when they were, bedridden and eventually passed away. The emotional, I guess, stress, the physicality of things that she went through without, I mean, I know she had her moments, but with a smile on her face is what I'm trying to say. And you know, the sacrifices she made for the family. And it's not like my dad didn't make sacrifices, right? I mean, there was obviously financial pressures and things like that growing up. So he did what he could. But what I always thought about growing up was who's looking after mum? You know, who yes, mum's looking after all of us, but who looks after mum? And I always wonder as I grew up, I always wonder if you know, if she had an ally, a male ally, and of course, dad was that person, you know, but limitations again, right? So he couldn't do all the things that I guess he could have done, perhaps. But I feel like if there was a male ally in her life that enabled, you know, some of these things, you know, if she could have thought outside the box, perhaps she wanted to, you know, pursue a different career, perhaps learn some skills that she never got a chance to do. And again, it's all hypothetical, right? We can't go back in time, unfortunately. But just having that option would have been great for mum to decide if she wanted to pursue a career, or if she wanted to, you know, have a hobby or a skill that she wanted to learn, but she never had the chance. So that, you know, that question, you know, what if she had a male ally, is really at the heart of why I care so much about this topic. Because I mean, at the heart of it, allyship isn't about, you know, grand gestures, right? It's about quiet, sort of consistent support, if you will, you know, to being there, to listening, and you know, those little things, just having awareness. And I wish, you know, my mom had that all of the 30 years. Of course, I couldn't be there at the time, but I like to think that I'm there for her now.
I love that. And you are. You probably are very, very, very much there for her. I love that. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Sony. And Ray.
Yeah, hi, Maribeth. Hi, everyone. And yeah, Sony and Amit, great to hear your stories there. Yeah, so I've been in automotive engineering for over 25 years now. I was born and raised in Perth, so from Western Australia, and from a third generation Australian family, a bit of a farming kind of background. And I've always been super passionate about cars and vehicles. So I'm someone, I love my job. I get up, it helps me get out of bed, and I've been very fortunate to have had an amazingly great career. I've been able to work around the world. I've worked in Formula One and World Rally Cars, and with a lot of different companies, and for the last 16 years with Toyota. And I guess I've always had the opportunity to come to work and be myself. And yeah, I love engineering, and STEM is one of those things where it's the data and the numbers that define your success. But I guess, you know, recognizing I was probably dumb and happy with some of this sort of stuff, to be honest. And I would have thought I was a very inclusive person. I've always tried to treat everyone with respect, and one of the cornerstones of Toyota is respect for people. But I realized, probably because of my privilege, I treated everyone the way that I treated myself. Now, I'm obviously white, Anglo, Australian born, heterosexual, cis, like all those. Yeah, I haven't had barriers. I'm not very tall, and I don't have good hair, so maybe there's some privileges I don't have. But I've got pretty much every privilege under the sun. And I always thought I was inclusive, but I've got some fantastic colleagues at Toyota. And you know, had a bit of a difficult conversation after a meeting a few years ago, where one of my colleagues pulled me aside and she said, "Ray, you really upset me in that meeting." And I was a bit taken aback, and it was because of the language I was using was very. I was referring to a third person about a hypothetical designer in Japan, and I was talking about them being a he the whole time. It was very male language, and yeah, hadn't realized that had completely put this person offside. So that started a big discussion, and it affected me quite a lot that I'd upset someone like that. And it started a big discussion about going all these little areas. And I realized how, by treating everyone the way that I thought I'd be treated, that wasn't actually a very inclusive workplace. And yeah, as being a senior manager, I've got a position of, I guess, an opportunity to influence. And I just want everybody to come to work and have the same opportunities, and to contribute and be myself and be themselves when they come to work. So that's really the story of how I got into this. And I'm also very pleased to say now I've got a daughter who's going through high school, and she's now deciding she wants to go down that STEM field. And it's great to see that. Yeah, I think things are changing a lot in that, and she's really excited to get into that side as well. So that's my story of how I'm here, and I look forward to sharing some of these learnings tonight.
That's fantastic. Isn't it interesting when you think you're doing all the right things and then you say something and you don't realize that what you've said could be really, really upsetting for somebody else. I will just ask, please pop yourselves on mute. There's some people that are not on mute, if you wouldn't mind. Yes. Hopefully they understand to put themselves on mute. That is great, because I don't have the controls to be able to do that. Okay. No, maybe not. We'll keep going. All right. So excellent. That's no. I think it's Safi. If you can hear me, can you please pop yourself on mute there? That would be great. All right. So first question that I've got for you. Amit, what does gender equality mean to you?
Thank you, Maribeth. So gender equality is, I think I've said that in my opening thing, is deeply personal. For me, it means equality. It means fairness, irrespective of gender. Be it our families, be it our friends, be it at work, social or professional. It means being seen, being heard, being valued in every interaction, every moment, and every decision that shapes our lives, irrespective of our genders. It's about having the same opportunity to learn, to lead, to speak up, and to succeed, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. Couple of examples, and this comes to just the norms and how we think at work, for example. One of my colleagues was promoted to a woman, a female, to a vice president. And while everybody was celebrating that, we realized there's a whole lot of gossip going on in the offices that the promotion was only because we had, and I did have, and the management had a KPI of 30% leadership have to be females. And people just assumed that the promotion was because of that KPI. We had to get people together. We had to bring everybody into a town hall and share the results of the people who had been promoted, not just her, but everybody, and what they had achieved. And her achievement was by far more than everybody else, males or females, that had been promoted in that term. But the idea was, without even jumping to, or without even bothering to find or understand, people just kind of jump to conclusions when it comes to women being given something or promoted at work. And that's because of that underlying, I think, culture where men do great, women are new at this, and if they're getting promoted, there must be an underlying reason. I think Ray and Sony already talked about it in meetings. I see it way too often. And I'm very happy to say that it's actually getting better and better. I had a couple of meetings this morning where it's a group of 20 odd people, including maybe 6 or 7 women. And the respect and the fairness and the openness was almost perfect. And I realized that a lot in some of these meetings, because I'm always kind of tuned out to these. But every time you're speaking, you're not just speaking to the men in the room, you're speaking to everybody. And when a woman speaks up, you let her speak up. All of that every time is really critical to give them that space and that equal space, and everybody gets that equal space irrespective of gender, is what it means to me. And it's in the smallest of the moments and to the largest of the decisions. It's everywhere, every time.
I think you're absolutely right. It is in the smallest things, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because I think that you get, I think we forget it's not about grand gestures.
No.
No, and just having somebody not take your idea as their own. And I've been in so many meetings, I have to tell you, I've been in IT for over 30 years. And I get that. I see it. I still see it. A woman will say something, then a man will say exactly the same thing, slightly differently, and they'll be like, "Oh, he's got a great idea," and the woman just sits there like, "I just said that," and it's really. And I see these people that are smiling and laughing and nodding their heads on, and that, or the no offense, Amit, but the mansplaining.
No,
Oh
I
Lord.
absolutely understand. And I said this in a previous board meeting, Eribeth. I sit on the board of Women for STEM. I'm the only male in every meeting because I'm the only male on the board. But not once have I felt that I have not been treated fairly by any individual on the board. And once we can do that with every female in every meeting where she's the only one, I think we'll have a much better world.
I think the one thing I like the most about our board is our board chair, who is fabulous and sitting on this call with us at the moment. And I won't embarrass Chris Skipper Conway, though I have now. Is that her very first question before we even start any business, after we've obviously done the acknowledgements, etc. But she will ask, "How is everyone? How are you feeling?" And I love that because honestly, I work in transport logistics. No one cares how you feel. Just get the job done. Thank you, Amit. I mean, that's lovely. Sony, so Amit's told us what he thinks of that gender equality space. I want to ask you, how do you think your own life and experiences have been shaped by gender expectations? Because you talked a lot about your mother and what she did and what was expected of her. I'm really keen to know what was expected of you.
Yeah. So if I was to sum up that in one sentence, just to start with, then I'll elaborate. So my early life experience, I think the quote, and I'm going to say it in Hindi and I will translate for the non-Indian audiences here. So it's a famous dialogue out of a movie by Bollywood star called Amitabh Bachchan, which I know Amit will know for 100%. I think I can see my dad in the audience. He might know this as well, for sure. There he is. The phrase is "Mard ko dard nahi hota." Mard ko dard nahi hota means men don't feel pain. Yeah. And that was personified in sort of Mumbai growing up, in movies that you saw, in I guess the way we were brought up. I think men were looked at as like I said before, the money providers of the household. We had to take on responsibilities without really thinking, it was okay to share the emotional load, if you will. We weren't. It was almost seen as taboo to show emotions in certain ways, in certain things, I think. So if I think about myself growing up, some of those things that were offered to me in terms of freedom was good. So as a male, I could leave the house at whatever time I wanted. I could do things that I wanted. But it was about, don't show too much emotion. Don't talk about your mental health. Don't cry. That was again, what's interesting is none of these things were ever taught or vocalized by my parents or um, you know, by anyone for that matter. But it was an invisible law that was sort of true in early India, if you will. And what's interesting is that obviously, as I grew up, when I moved to the UK, I kind of saw that made me struggle a little bit to connect to certain people because I wasn't letting my guard down. I wasn't being empathetic towards people, especially women, for that matter, because I was afraid that I was showing too much of vulnerability, and that wasn't good because I couldn't build very strong relationships early on. What's interesting is even today sometimes I find myself, I catch myself thinking, oh, should I say that? Is that too emotional? Is that too empathetic? And there's a story a couple of years ago. I was in the US in Boston, where I was playing with my nephew. I was in my cousin's house and I was playing with my nephew in the backyard, and he fell over, and he was looking at me, and I could see that he was just about to cry. You know, when kids look at you and they go, okay, well, I'm about to cry if the adult looks like they're afraid. And as soon as the tears came out, the first things out of my mouth was, come on, boys don't cry. Um, and I caught myself there, and my brother, my cousin, heard that as well, and he caught that. He's my older brother or cousin rather. Um, and then we spoke about that for many hours just to dissect how, these things are. Um, so look, the good news is that once you sort of start to notice these patterns, which I have, you can challenge them. You can unlearn some of these biases, which, I am a product of massive biases growing up. But more importantly, I think, you can do so much to help the next generation, to do things differently. That's why, these conversations about male allyship kind of ring home for me, because it's not just about women's equality. It's so much more than that. It's about freeing us all from, these sort of roles that genders have chosen for us and somehow we've inherited. And so for me, the journey isn't about just being an ally to women. That's a bonus. It's actually about becoming a better person, a whole person. And I think that's something worth striving for.
I think you're absolutely right, because it's similar to that mentor-mentee relationship, isn't it? It is that, and I know that this is all about male allies and how do you get male allies, but I'm going to say this to any of the men that are on this with us, and any of the men that will be watching this. Allyship, it's like mateship, isn't it? It's that you can have a male ally and be a man. You can have a male ally and be a woman. You can have a female ally and be etc. We are all in it together. And the nonsense that men shouldn't be emotional and that they shouldn't allow that side of themselves to be shown, it's destroying men as we go, isn't it? We have the highest suicide rates is for young men, and that is because you can't say what you actually feel. But if you have a really good ally and you start to build those relationships, because that's what it's all about, then you can at least express that. And there's nothing wrong with expressing that. Absolutely nothing wrong. And it is not weak. So any of you that sit there thinking that it is weak, it is not. Thank you, Sony. I absolutely hear what you're saying.
Thank you, Mary.
Ray. And Ray, I know you're going to talk to this one because you already said to me you really wanted to really get into the nitty-gritty on this question. So have you ever witnessed or experienced gender bias or inequality? How did it make you feel? How did you respond? And you gave us a little bit of an insight when we did your opening. I think we all want to hear a bit more.
Yeah. So I've definitely experienced it, seen it, and as I said, inadvertently contributed to it. And that's when you realize that it was definitely a difficult situation for me. After that conversation I mentioned before, I had a couple of sleepless nights where it was kind of an epiphany moment, honestly. Sometimes the things you see are very obvious. It could be like you mentioned, people being spoken over in a meeting, or their voice not being heard, or even worse, where their voice is then misrepresented, and someone taking an idea. Have seen that. I'm very fortunate. My partner is also she's a very intelligent and very strong person, and she's had it in her profession, and so I hear the sides there, and you do see it, and it obviously makes you feel terrible when you see it, and it's very difficult, I think, because it's very systemic. There's some very deep rooted psychological kind of, I guess it's as mentioned, it's the way it's like culture, upbringing, all these things can contribute to this. So you're dealing with things that people probably, a lot of the time, it's very subconscious and they don't even realize it's happening. But it's really important to prevent it. So I think in the case of things like meetings, it's about if you're in a position of some kind of power or privilege, is to call it out. and make sure, especially, that everyone has an equal voice. That's a really important thing that we need to do. And I think that's a really critical part. And I feel like that's something, there's a lot of talk about meetings and efficiency and, good agendas, but making sure that everyone has the voice and everyone's given a voice. I think that's an area in professional world that we have to work harder on. And that's an area where I have seen it. Secondly, as I mentioned, I did always feel I was inclusive, but that whole treating everyone as you treat yourself, you don't realize some of the biases and some of the inequalities that might come out. As you said, bias is not always a bad thing. I've got a very strong bias against snakes, for example. So it's not bad to have a bias, but you have to recognize it. So yeah, those things, and when, especially in a position of privilege like I am, you don't always realize them, and it does take someone to talk to you sometimes to be able to understand. It's not always possible to actually realize these things. So one of the ones that was not probably obvious in our work, so the work that my team does is vehicle testing. So in Toyota, the vehicles are developed mainly in Japan. But if you think about our off-road vehicles, like our Land Cruisers and our Prados and our Hiluxes, those types of vehicles, they're used by people out in the real world in some really harsh environments, places like the middle of the outback in Australia, through Central Africa, through South America. Our job is to make sure we test the vehicles in these environments so that when these people that really rely on their products to do their job and live their life, they do the right thing. So we have to get out and travel. We have to go out into remote areas. We're out bush. Sometimes it's in the mountains, sometimes in the desert. There's not always very nice, facilities in these areas. And what we were finding was that the travel is part of doing our job, but we weren't making it a very nice thing. And that was then putting some of our fantastically talented female colleagues off wanting to be part of some of that work. Now, in my line of work, that experience you get from that is actually part of how you develop yourself. So by not having a very inclusive travel environment meant that people weren't able to get equal opportunities of experience, which then actually does impact your ability for growth and promotion. And so that was kind of like I guess, not so obvious. So this was one of the areas we then worked on really hard, was to go, well, what is a more inclusive way of doing travel? So we broke it down and engaged with our team, especially obviously the female team, and said, we want you to tell me what are the gaps, what are the things that are really uncomfortable, what are the things that we need to change here. And it was things like, just as a small example, going to the toilet, we've got to make these uncomfortable topics more comfortable. What was happening is we'd be driving and there's not always not great facilities, but we'd say, oh, does anyone need to stop here? And then that meant that if you did need to stop, you felt like you were holding up the team. So what we did, just a simple thing, was to say, right, we program in rest stops. And it's not, oh, who wants to stop? It's right, we're stopping here. Little things like that. Making sure food was more inclusive, understanding some of the conditions in advance. Those sort of points were really important. And so that was step one. The second thing is that it shouldn't be just because Ray or someone else is leading the trip. It should be no matter who you are, you get the same experience. So making those things standardized. And again, we need to move to a place where there's no biases. It doesn't matter who's in the room. It should be the same experience. And that comes from recognizing these gaps, putting in some systems to prevent them, and then making sure that they are standardized. So they're the areas of how, I guess, recognizing that there was biases, there was some inequality, and then how I think we can move forward best to try to prevent that.
And I think it's that making it universal, isn't it? So if we make it, and if we think of this from when we were doing a lot around neurodivergence and neurodiversity, we were working with a company called Specialistern, and they talked a lot about universal. Oh God, I can't even say the word now, but making it universal, whatever it is that we look at. So it isn't just a who wants to stop. I love that idea of we're stopping here and we're programming this in because we know that we need rest stops. We also know that, yes, some people do have eating challenges. It's not just women that, have that are celiac and they can't have wheat or dairy, those sorts of things. So really programming the things and making it systemic, what we're looking at, but being open to making it systemic. And it takes away that oh well, we have to stop, we can't eat
Yep.
here because so and so can't have this or that. We remove that, so that stigma, right? Because it's a stigma.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not because we don't doing it because this person's on the activity. This is just what we do. And then the interesting thing is that so now our male colleagues have all gone, actually, this is a lot nicer now. And secondly, there's the intersectionality of color and religion as well. Is things like talking about food actually opened up a lot of these other discussions that actually made it a much more inclusive place. The big thing is we have a programmed in, this is what we do all the time. And then if someone has an individual request, then they can still raise that, but we have that discussion up front. So it's not then anxiety creating by not knowing what's coming, and it's opened up these opportunities for a wider range of people.
I think that's wonderful. I'm a scuba diver, and okay, and some of the places that I dive do not have great facilities. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if anybody has ever visited a long drop in the outback, but they are quite disgusting. However, you become quite desensitized to that when you want to do an activity. But when it's work and it's my work and my workplace, and I'm on the road and that is my workplace, yeah, I want people to consider that. I think that's really important. And I don't think that I don't think that that is gender at all. I think that is
No,
just,
no.
it is just what we need as people. So I love that. And I love that you've made it inclusive. And knowing the Toyota way is that everything then just becomes part of those standard operating procedures, which means that it is quite an open and very welcoming place to work, which I think is brilliant. Thank you for that, Ray. I'm going to go back to Sony because we were talking about, and we were talking about sort of how this stuff makes you feel. And Sony, I know that you talked about your own privilege and how that has impacted you. But talk us about a little bit more through understanding your own privilege as a man in the workplace, and how does it influence your actions and decisions? Has it impacted your actions and decisions, and what have you done to change those? Because I think that what Ray was saying was really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Sony.
Yeah, that is a deeply personal question for me. No doubt. I've seen the stark contrast in sort of the lives that I was privileged enough to lead versus a lot of people that were close to me, women that were close to me growing up that couldn't. I think I had the freedom of being able to leave my home at 18, and I dare say that if I wasn't born a man, I don't think I would have left home at 18. I don't know what my dad thinks of that, but I think that's certainly the case. That's probably true in my head. If I think about some of the people that I grew up with, my best mate growing up, Zeb, she came from a relatively conservative Muslim family, and the stark difference between the life she led and her brother, who was only a year older than her, it was shocking even then. Like Zeb wouldn't be allowed to leave the house post 6 p.m., whereas her brother had no such restrictions. Even things like our friendship was an absolute secret in front of her parents, so we couldn't be friends. And it's just things like that. There was always scrutiny, and we had to lie to protect our bond, if you will. Things like that were exhausting. Even my cousin, for that matter, closer to home, we'd planned a little cousin's trip away when she was 18, and her dad would not allow her to come out with the cousins, and this was like a family member, if you will. So things like that, and while I was at 18, I was living my life in the UK, and I was able to, I mean, look, obviously there were struggles in my life, and there were separate struggles, but I think just having that opportunity to break free, the opportunity to get out of my comfort zone, and even being thrown in the deep end, where I could sort of sink or swim, and I obviously swam. And the fact that I was able to learn and grow and be confident as a human being, being able to then, move again at 22, 23, move again to Australia and start again. I had that confidence. If I think about my wife, when she moved here, she was, I think she was 24, 25. And yeah, she didn't have that confidence, because I think about the steps that she couldn't perhaps take when she was 18, to go away and build an independent life, because she was still living at home, and she probably didn't get that sort of upbringing, even though her parents were still relatively liberal. I mean, I think when I think about privilege, I think I don't feel bad about the fact that I was born man, but I do think that if you ignore that privilege, then that's probably a bad thing. Because saying that, oh, life's unfair, and you should get a leg up where you get it and you can take it. I think that's a bit sad. So how does that influence my actions today? I think number one is awareness, right? So it makes me more intentional, whether it's in my marriage, it's in my friendships, and in my workplace. I think what I wasn't very good at in the past, if I think about Robert Half, again, we have a little bit of a male problem, I'd say, in terms of, the management team is predominantly male. And I feel like I feel like now that I know my privilege, my position, I think like I check myself before I speak. I think about others that perhaps don't have the same voice, and what's the reason for that? Whether you can make those people feel comfortable. Yeah, I think I think the tech space, specifically at Robert Half, when I think about my clients, when I think about the hiring that I do, especially in software engineering, it's a very male dominated field. I feel like there is obviously things that need to change. I think changing them at the level of recruitment is probably far too gone, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing, Mary Beth, in terms of Go Girl and spreading awareness early, in terms of being having those people, or having the women, I guess, learn and grow and be enthusiastic about technology from an early stage. I think that's really important.
You're absolutely right. You're right. And I liked what you said about the intentionality, being intentional. So what I'd ask of everyone on this webinar, be intentional about what it is you want to do. As in, so from I guess from a organizational perspective, Toyota and Robert Half certainly have been intentional. They have said, they put their hand up and said, we want to be employer of choice, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is important to us. So we're going to support Women for STEM and other things as well. It's not just Women for STEM. So they do some great work. So I applaud that. But I think you're absolutely right, Sonia. You can't. Yes, there is privilege in being a man. If you're a white man, greater privilege, etc. Yes, you have that, but it's what you do and how you recognize and how you actually do something to make change. And everyone on this webinar, I'm going to get some questions to the guys to talk about what you can do, and they've got some thoughts in that space, so I'm looking forward to that. But I wanted to sort of take a step to the side and ask Amit a question. So this is a hard one, Amit, and when we went through these questions earlier, it was like, oh, okay, well, that's a bit pointy, Mary Beth, but hey, why not?
I was looking forward to a hard one, Mary Beth.
So do you think men have a responsibility to speak out against sexism and support gender equality? Why or why not? And I want you to tell me, how do you do it without throwing yourself under the bus, but also empowering those around you and making it not tokenism? So there you go. I made it a little bit harder there.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Good question. I think what we have already established in the last maybe almost an hour or so is that when we create equal opportunities, everyone wins. Our teams perform better. Our families are bonded much better. Our cultures become a lot more inclusive. our societies become or grow stronger. And therefore, it's not a women's issue. It's a human issue. And therefore, men absolutely have a responsibility to speak out against bias or sexism and support gender equality. A number of reasons why men, for example, because men still hold, and especially, I think Sony's talked about it, Ray's talked about it, I've talked about it, be it families or be it at workplace, men still hold most power. When you talk about number of men in any organization, far outnumbers the number of women, especially in the leadership positions, which is sad. But with that power comes responsibility. Responsibility to understand that when we create equal opportunities, everybody wins. And therefore, the responsibility to use it to create fairer, more inclusive environments. Every individual should get heard, and only then we will actually grow and sustain. Allyship sets the tone. When men will call out the biases in meetings or otherwise, other men will listen. Vis-a-vis, when women call this out, men might ignore it. Men do ignore it, actually. And therefore, men have to speak up because others will look up to those men. They will understand, they will acknowledge, they will appreciate, and therefore they will copy. And I think last not the least, silence of a man or men not speaking up sustains inequality, because sexism or any sort of bias thrives in silence. When men won't speak up, harmful behaviors and biases will continue to go unchallenged, and we'll continue to have this issue that we have today, which I think has improved considerably over the last few decades, years, but still nowhere close to where it needs to be. So at my workplace, yes, I have a formal KPI to have 30% or women in our leadership. But my team was literally the only team in the entire organization, one of the largest teams, where we had 50-50. And sometimes it might drop to late 40s, early 50s, but it was very close to a 50-50. And I'm talking about my leadership team. And that was done proactively throughout the year, not only when it was a KPI time. And ours was also consistently, by far, the most performing team in Capgemini in terms of a sector. And I sincerely believe, if not 100%, a large part of that was because of the way the teams were structured, the way the teams worked as a team. Because when you have this equality, it actually makes a team a team. So we actually went out and we tried very hard that we continue to keep that percentage same in recruitment, in hiring, in promotions, in L&D, etc. And that really helped.
I was thinking when you were speaking there, and I made a few little notes here on screen because I just thought about it. And I thought, you can't be what you can't see, right? And I talk a lot about that, having, women up on stage and speaking, and so that other women know that they can. But this takes it that next step further. Model the behavior you want to change, lead the way. And I think that's really what you're saying. And at the end of the day, we're all herd beasts, herd animals, right? That's what we do. We see, and if we see a leader, somebody that's stronger, that's in a leadership position, and they are actually speaking up against an inequality or speaking up against something that does not resonate and does not resonate with their personal values, the values of the organization or the team, etc. When you start modeling that behavior, others will actually want to model it too. It's when we remain silent, you remain silent, and then that's when the bad things happen. That's why we need to agitate. And it is a form of agitation, right? Not just in a washing machine, but in the
No,
workplace.
absolutely. And it's not once and it's not twice, it's at every moment and every opportunity you get to agitate, you have to.
But it's the same as when we talk about, doing an acknowledgement of country. I remember being in I was a part of the Reconciliation Action Team, and I wanted to implement this in the organization I worked at, and it was literally and I thought, oh, you've got to be kidding, right? I mean, I'm an immigrant, so I think this is really important. But I kept doing it until people sort of said, hey, actually, this is really good. And those people in the organization who were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander actually said to me, I feel heard. I feel heard. I feel like I'm being heard. And it's the same. So we want to model the behaviors, those really good behaviors we want to see. Thank you. Thank you, Wamit.
Absolutely.
So, Sony, on that note, how can men better listen to the experiences of women and marginalized groups without making it about themselves?
Yeah, that's one that I struggled with for a little while, Mary Beth.
The question or the response? Or
Well,
the action?
bit of both, actually. No, the action of that, to be fair. So I feel like men, I mean, I shouldn't generalize, but I do think that at least for myself, I've always had the mentality of jumping into things and fixing it, right? So it's even growing up, I think, as I was saying before, because men were looked at as the provider of the family, we had this innate sort of need and nature of whether it was a problem that mum came with or my girlfriend, the innate nature would be, this is what to do. Let's do this. Let's do this. And I found myself doing that a fair bit over and over again. And I think I started to notice it eat into my relationship early days, maybe almost maybe 7, 8 years ago when Alethea first moved to Australia. And completely new place, new culture, if you will. No friends, no family. And I'd obviously been away from home and I had some experiences, and she would come to me and she would say, oh, I'm struggling with this at work. And I would be like, oh, this is what I would do. This is what you should do. And it's crazy because in my head, I was doing the noble thing. I was like, oh, I'm trying to fix it. I'm the provider. I'm going to do the right thing. And it's insane that it wasn't. It was making it worse because she's not the same person as I am. And the funny thing is, most of the time in situations like this, people in general just want to be heard, right? Um, so I think the way I've started to combat that is I'm fighting my instinct, which is I am as soon as there is a problem at hand, whether that's a woman colleague or if it's Alethea or my mum, the first thing I want to do now is sort of take a step back, ask what they want from this conversation. If it's a person at work, what would you like? Would you like advice? Would you like action? Or would you just want to be heard? Right? I think a simple question like that for me has opened up the conversation and helped me even build better relationships with, my wife, my mum, perhaps, a lot of colleagues at work, I'd say. And um, and then you kind of take it from there, right? I mean, it depends on the relationship. Perhaps if you're the mentor, there is a mentee there expecting advice. They want your opinion. Maybe that is up for them to decide, and for you to give only when they say it's okay. Um, yeah, it's taken a while, but I think I'm finally at that stage where I can say, yeah, I'd take a step back, listen to the problem before jumping to conclusions.
Terribly enlightened. That really absolutely is. I'm going to give everyone a bit of advice, my own advice. I used to say to my husband, I don't want you to fix this. I'm just venting. And or I'd say, I need your advice on this. please. And I was very, very specific. We have a really good question that's jumped into the chat. I don't normally do this, but I'm going to ask it because it was just on the back of sort of the last two responses, and I think that it's really an important question. So I'm sorry, gentlemen, I'm derailing us a little bit, but I think that I would really like to hear some input. And Ray, you can jump in on the response of this one if you like as well. So Diana's popped into the chat. There's a mention of calling out behaviours as it happens as a way to be an ally. I work in male-dominated fields and I am yet to have anyone call out biased behaviours. Afterwards, it is recognised that something bad happened, so that after the fact, right? So from my perspective, I don't think it's easy to call out. I'm curious on the perspective of Sony, Amit and Ray on how to call out behaviours of biases in the moment. And I am wondering, Diana, and if you're on there with me, would you like the gentleman to say, like, from their perspective, or do you want them to sort of do you want a woman to say that in the meeting, or is it just from the male perspective? You're on mute, I think, Diana. No, I still can't hear you. Type it in and we'll see. But would anyone like to have a little bit of a stab at that from the male perspective, please? It's a hard one.
I'll have a little bit of a go, but it is a difficult one, because a lot of these behaviours that can be a little bit, maybe it's little small things from time to time that come up, and so as an outsider you may not necessarily see it if it's been repeated behaviour by especially an individual, maybe over a period of times. That is very difficult to see sometimes from the outside, and it is very difficult to call out. It's depending on your company culture. Toyota in particular is one of those cultures that tends to praise in public and criticize in private. And I think that's, I'll be honest, I probably haven't called some of the things out that I've seen enough. You might take someone aside after the meeting and call it there. And that's where I think, but by the time it's got to that point, that often means that you haven't set things up. For example, making sure everyone's got a correct voice. That's how I think we have to deal with that in the future, to be proactive on it. And then, but calling someone out at the time, it's very challenging, and I think we all need to, we can all improve in that area.
I think,
Sony, Amit? Yep.
yeah, so I absolutely agree with Ray. But also I honestly believe that calling it out then and there will have the maximum impact.
Mm-hmm.
You can take somebody out there, and the reason why he or she, in some cases it could be a she, so it's not necessarily a he who has those behaviors, but mostly they are. They're doing it because half the time, or more than half the time, they don't know that it's wrong and that they're doing it. So they don't probably even know that they are doing it. And because somebody is doing it, others think and continue to think almost all their lives that it's okay to do it. So for example, if in our meetings, I was just thinking about the response when Ray was talking, and I realized, for example, in calls, and we usually do it on Teams, so I don't know if this features there in Zoom, but in Teams, for example, you can raise your hand, and it's beautiful little emoji just comes there and it waits for somebody to notice. I've had multiple calls today and every day, but just from today, and I realize almost 99% of the times it's the women who raise their hands, and the men kind of, when they want to talk, they just talk.
Yeah.
They may not talk on top of anybody. They may not cut anybody, but they wait for the turn. And the moment somebody shuts up, they start talking. Whereas women raise their hands and they politely and kindly wait for everybody to finish and somebody to notice that somebody has raised a hand. I think the moment somebody has raised a hand, I do it actively and every time without exception. If you have raised a hand, Maribeth, and somebody is talking, the moment he stops and somebody else starts, male or female, I will say, sorry, Maribeth has her hand up. And you do that once or twice in a single meeting, nobody else will speak up in that meeting. It doesn't mean they won't do it again in the next meeting. But you do that in front of one individual 20 times in 10 different meetings, he or she will learn that that's wrong. And that was my previous point, that you have to not do it once or twice. You have to consistently do it, because people are doing it because they have learned that negative culture. from last 30, 40, 50 years of their upbringing. So to change that after that long a time, it takes a while. It's not easy. It's deep rooted. And it's deep rooted because they never knew it was wrong. And that is why it's so much more important, I think, to do it then and there, politely, but then and there, than later.
Sony, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I definitely agree with what Amit and Ray said there. The only thing I had to add, I was thinking whether if it's too confrontational to do it then and there, obviously depending on what's happened and what the scenario is, I usually find instead of doing it over Teams or in a meeting sort of setting, which, makes it feel a bit formal and officey, can you walk out the office and go for a coffee and have a conversation and give the feedback to the person that way? I feel like when I have feedback to give to someone that might be a little bit tricky, I try and do it outside of a formal setting, and that takes the edge off a little bit. I'm not sure if that helps.
I think they're great ideas, and I was going to add to that, Diana, just from being a woman who's worked in male dominant or underrepresented organisations for all except for the last 2 years at Women for STEM, so always male dominated. What I would do, depending on when I was more junior, I would speak to my one up and I would say, I didn't appreciate that particular behavior. We need to do something in that space, because I felt that was safe to do so. And I wouldn't do it in a meeting because I didn't want the confrontation, because I was younger at the time. And, you don't want to you want people to like you, right? That's what it all comes down to. We want people to like us. So we don't want to say that. But as we get older, we start to care less about how much people like us. However, it's always a possible course of action for you, Diana, when you are in that space or confronted with that, is to go speak to your line manager or speak to that person individually and say, hey, do you realize that the way with which you behaved really made me and quite a few other people feel uncomfortable? Is that what was that the intent? I'm just curious. Always go into these things with an air of curiosity, not with an air of anger or distrust or whatever, but curiosity, because I certainly think that a lot of people, as Amit and Sony and Ray said, a lot of this is ingrained and it's cultural. And we're trying to change cultural expectations, cultural norms. It's going to take time. And unfortunately, as with wage parity, Chris, tell me if I'm wrong, but 180 years we'll get to pay parity. So I'm not really prepared to wait that long. However, it is really about having those conversations. And as Amit has said, it's that reinforcement. Reinforce the positive behavior. If we reinforce the positive behavior, people are more likely to want to follow that, because that would make them feel better. It makes you feel good. You don't want to make people feel miserable in a meeting. All right, I'll get back on track with the next question. It was actually our final question to you, Ray, and then we're going to open it up to the panel, who have got some key things that they want to be able to tell you all and help you with creating and curating your allyship in your organizations. But Ray, this one's to you. So how do we take our male colleagues on the journey of equality without alienating them or disempowering them, and make them male allies too? Really important question, Ray. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I also want to say, just to the question that came from Dinah, I'm really sorry that she's had the experience of not feeling supported in this area. So that, again, I think one of the first steps, and I think it was Sonny that touched on it. One of the worst qualities we have as men is listening sometimes. And you've got to start by listening, because by listening, you understand the issue. Sometimes different people, because of these are to do with beliefs, they're to do with your personal and lived experiences. One person's experience might not give the same response as another person in exactly the same scenario. So it's really important to listen and ask questions. That's what shows you where the problems are really coming from. And when it comes to then bringing your male colleagues along, I think firstly, you touched on it before, you have to avoid tokenism. Tokens are numbers. We're talking about a human issue here. So you have to bring people along the human element. And it's as simple sometimes as talking about someone's, would you really want your daughter or your niece or your, this kind of thing is one of the. It sounds crazy, but that's sometimes you need to take things to a human level. And I guess just a little side on this one, because it's a bit of a passionate subject for myself, is my wife and I often compare social media. And social media has, it thrives off confrontation. It thrives off controversy. You get a lot more clicks for something that's a bit controversial. And my social media as a male versus my wife's social media, some of the things are very anti. It's like anti-feminism, honestly, in the stuff that I get, and it's about some really negative points there. And then my wife's feed will be far more about anti-male. So there's a lot of pressures there that are giving this society, I guess, negativity about what we're talking about here, which is actually people and human and having the same opportunity for everyone. So there's some of the difficulties we have with it. Where some of the points that I guess we've had success, I believe, for example, in our engagement and belonging type surveys, typically you look at a number. It's like, okay, this was your percentage, and oh yeah, great, we're 4% up from last year. Happy days. But it's important to then break it down into the elements that break that up. And one of the ways we've looked at that is then breaking it down. Well, what's the difference between male and female results, as an example? And then you can also go into culture or age, etc. And you start to realize that what might be, especially in an area like ours that has a very high percentage of male, is that the overall score might be higher, but you might have a big difference from male to female. And that's what we started to see. But rather than then say, well, and it was touched on, I think, by Sony before as well, it's not about trying to say, well, the privilege means we got to pull that down. What we need to then start talking to is everyone going, well, you're having this experience, but some others aren't. How do we bring everybody up so that you have the same experience? And we felt that, I think that kind of language is what we need to be reprogramming. It's not about, oh, there's a big difference. Okay, there's a difference. Well, we should all be aiming to have a really good experience when we come to work, but clearly there's something not there. So you've got to start by visualizing it, but bringing this in as a human level. This is not a number. This is my colleague Diana, or my colleague Kirsty, or my colleague Priya. This is the experience that they are having. And that I found is a really important step. And some of my, at some of our divisional comms that we have, we've talked through some of this. I've had some of my colleagues come up who are probably from a demographic that was very deep-seated with some of these historical beliefs, and they were like, yeah, actually, the way this was explained, that makes a lot more sense. Like when we started talking about how we're trying to improve our recruitment and how we're trying to improve our position, it's about still allowing everyone on merit, but there are some barriers that stop people from being able to have the same experience. So that is really important. And I think that's what we've all got to keep working towards, is how to make sure that it's a number, but these are people, and it's about the experience this person is having, and we should all be having a similar experience.
I like that, having the similar experience. And I talk a lot about diversity is about balance, right? It's about balance. It's not about disempowering one for another. It's not about that. But when we have diversity of thought and diversity across the board, it makes for such a rich environment because you get so many different perspectives. Yeah. And that's really important. And I was going to say, when you're talking about the journey, the traveling side of your job there, Ray, and it's just going to let you know, women aren't small men. So when you're doing your crash test stuff, please just remember that, because we're not just smaller versions of men. All right. So I'm mindful of the time. We want to give people a chance to have questions if they've got any questions for all of the panel. So this is to each of the panelists. You got a couple of minutes each to respond. But I think everyone on this webinar would love to know, what are the key takeaways that the attendees on this call can use when seeking support from male allies, even garnering male allyship? Who would like to start me off? Amit?
I can go first. I think being very clear with what allyship looks like and be a role model, I think is really critical. And the number of things we have talked about today about how we can go about it doing it. In my mind, one is obviously speak up in meetings and seminars and at home and everywhere we can, but just be very clear about what you are speaking about, but also be very consistent. You can't do it in one meeting and then be okay with it in the next 5 meetings. So speak up in meetings, call out these biases as often as possible, be very polite, but be very sort of firm. You could sponsor or mentor women. So for example, in our case in CAP, we used to have, we would sort of sponsor 4 or 5 women each, given how much bandwidth everybody had, to say, we will sponsor, and like what we do at Women for STEM for STEM, we would do that actively for women who would join us as a grad or otherwise to help them through their careers. And also, when you are being given a feedback as a male, so till now I've been talking about when I give feedback and when I speak up. When I have been, and like Ray had said, sometimes we could be doing it as well without realizing ourselves that what we have just done is wrong, or we have allowed somebody else to continue to do wrong. When somebody does give you feedback, take it positively, think about it, and then try very hard to inculcate that in your behavior and as part of your culture going forward. So listen very carefully and openly as well.
Thank you, Amit. I was going to say, so we've got predominantly women on this webinar. So the things that Amit is talking about are things that you can actually take and speak to. And for the predominantly, you're going to have them. I would be very surprised. You know, some of you may have female line managers, but if you do not, if you've got male line managers, have a chat with them about this webinar. What are some of the things that have been said here? So these things of that behavior on Teams calls, behavior in meetings, not talking over, and bring them along the journey of this conversation, because all you're having is a conversation. And any leader who's worth, you know, if they're a leader of worth, let's say, then they're going to want to listen to these things, because you're hearing from men in the industry who are saying these are the things that would make me and help me respond in a way that would make the workplace for all so much better. So these are the things that I'm hearing. It's certainly what I hear from you, Amit. So for the women on here, listen to this stuff and go have a conversation. Even say to your boss, listen, this webinar is going to be on Women for STEM's YouTube channel. Have a listen to this, because there's some really good stuff there. Ray, what are your thoughts on that? What are some of the key takeaways that the women on this call, because there's predominantly women, what do you think they could take away from this?
Yeah, I think maybe it's similar to what you just mentioned there, Mary Beth, but it's please don't be afraid to raise and explain issues. That's a really big one. Good leaders want to know, but it's very hard to sympathize as a male, because it might be issues you don't even know. One of the things with privilege is you can be a bit blind in this, and that's the situation I was in. So if something's not right, raise it, but be specific, because the more specific that you have, you know, if you can give an example, this happened in a meeting, or this scenario I'm not happy with, or you know, this, whatever the situation is, the more specific, the more easy it is to get that support. And then that it's very easy to kind of miss things completely. And you might think that, you know, when you deal with me, that this person's not understanding, but actually I just may not even know about it. So I think the more specific you can be, and yeah, the more we have to all get comfortable talking about some uncomfortable things, and I think that's a big thing. So don't be afraid to raise some of those issues. It's easy to say be confident. That can be difficult, but the more specific, you know, we're a STEM field here. STEM is about data. It's about being specific. You know, that's a big power that everybody on this call will have. Is you've got the power of data, you've got the power of science, you've got the power of STEM. Bring these issues, anything that you can see. The more specific, the better. I think that's really one of the big takeaways. And if someone's not going to listen, then they're not worth talking to, and find someone else who will.
I like what you say there, Ray. I think that's really important. And I wanted to call out, just for everyone that's on this webinar, we are, one of our other free webinars that's coming along later in the year is talk women's health concerns. certainly reproductive concerns, etc., where really hard conversations to have with a male line manager, but we'll be talking through in that how you can have those conversations in a way that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable, nor does it make somebody else feel uncomfortable. But, you know, as you said, as all of my panelists have said tonight, and I love this, these are human issues. These are human issues because these things affect men and women to some extent. Thank you, Ray. Sony, over to you.
Yeah, I think everyone made some really good points there. I think overarchingly, I think about this topic as how can we normalize it, right? In a workplace, at least at Robert Half, if I think about mentor-menteeship, that's very, very normalized. If somebody wants a mentor, they're more than happy to approach anyone and say, hey, can you mentor me? You know, can I watch you? What are your thoughts? Can I get advice every couple of weeks? I feel the more we talk about these things, the more we're aware, the more we normalize it. And why can't allyship be normalized just in that sort of same way? I think men stand to gain as much, if not more, from the women ally, you know, in terms of getting advice on things that we do. So why can't it be a reciprocal sort of relationship there? Yes, we could probably be, you know, a support or a voice in a meeting room for a female ally. But at the same time, there are things that I struggle with on a day-to-day that I know my colleagues at work can help me that are female because they think differently to I do. So that's really powerful. I think for women, encouraging accountability, not perfection, is important. So feedback, Amit mentioned, Ray mentioned it as well. Allies are not going to be perfect, far from it. I think the easier it is for you to have the conversation and give us feedback, the better allies we will be.
I love that. I love that. Feedback immediately. Think of it with your kids, right? If you reprimand your child for something that they've done now, you don't wait and then 6 months later raise every single thing that you've reprimanded them for over the last 6 months. It just has no impact at all.
Yeah.
They have no idea. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Now, I'm going to open up. We've got about sort of 4 or 5 minutes, not a lot, because we did answer a question midstream, which I really wanted to ask that because I thought it was really important. Anyone have a question? They want to raise their hand or want to pop it in the chat? Any questions for Sony, Ray, and Amit? And gentlemen, while we're waiting for some questions or people to pop their hands up, if people want to link with you on LinkedIn, are you comfortable with that? Yep,
Yes,
everyone's
absolutely.
comfortable. They're all on LinkedIn, ladies, so do link with them. And Sony, because he is in recruitment, he might be a really good person to reach out to if your male boss or line manager is not the sort of person you want to work for. So any questions from anybody? If not, I will always have questions. So I have rafts and rafts of questions. Anyone have a question? Chris Skipper Conway, you are always good for a question. You're on mute.
So I have to acknowledge that I still find confronting that you'll be in a group and there'll be something that really displays the, probably in an older group, men's biases, and that doesn't get called out. And I know for a woman, you know, I've just said, well, that's not necessarily my opinion. But I do find it uncomfortable to say, and that is not appropriate.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just something I don't know, but I think that, and I think it's amongst more mature men. But I do think that's something that I've experienced throughout my life. And it's just something that I just wondered if any of you got any advice for me, how I could call that out with dignity and professionalism. Hard one.
So sorry, I didn't quite catch the question. Did you say male biases?
Yes, so when somebody makes a disparaging remark about a woman, a group of men, and you're in that company, usually is partners, wives, friends. How do you call that out in a professional way? Just like we talked in a meeting, and I'm comfortable doing that in a meeting, but in a group of friends where you're actually seeing about a group of friends and they are making disparaging remarks to a woman.
I think in a group of friends, Chris, I find it quite easy.
Okay.
At work, I think the way to do it is, and it has happened in the past. So it's just taking an example where somebody in my team was expecting, and my boss's boss, so obviously quite senior, made a comment in a gathering of 5 or 6 people about her ability to continue to do her work. And I mean, it's difficult to say anything at that time, and it was a really inappropriate comment. But you could, I, for example, at that time just said, you can't say that, but with a smile, and then moved on that topic rather than continue to labor on it. With mature old people, especially boss's boss, it was difficult, but you still have to at least say something. Otherwise, they will never learn.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. Sally, you have your hand up.
Hi, yeah. So my question's not that different actually from what Chris said. I was going to say that similarly, like if I'm in a meeting, I'm happy to call someone out if they talk over the top of me, things like that. But I've been in the situation where I've overheard male colleagues talking about me behind my back. And I guess I just wanted to know how you would approach that situation if, you know, if someone said something about a female colleague when they weren't necessarily in the room. That was generally it's commenting on my appearance and stuff like that. Yeah, and just how you would react to that situation.
Who wants to? Yeah, Frey?
If that's right, yeah. Sorry, I'll raise my hand. I think yeah, both the situations, and yeah, again, it's terrible that these are things that we're still experiencing. I think what I'll say, yeah, in terms of maybe the personal situation was mentioned before. I think that is easier, and I'm very proud to see, especially I've got a 19-year-old son, and I've seen him and his cohorts, they call that stuff out against each other very quickly. And so I think that's an improving situation for sure. And I've been very proud to see that that's the kind of behaviors that are being modeled in younger generation now. I think that's great. In the workplace, if you're experiencing it, maybe some of the things I could consider, it's of course, they are uncomfortable things, and we should be calling it out if it's blatantly discriminatory, sexist commentary. It should be called out then and there, and no matter who, how uncomfortable it is, that should be called out. It's the little repeated ones that maybe other people don't see that are a bit underhanded. They can be a challenging one, and my advice on that is maybe if you're starting to see that as a repeated behavior, yeah, bring someone even before the meeting and say, look, I've had some of this. This has happened a couple of times, and I've had this situation where someone's raised that, and then you can be a lot more attuned to it. That's probably the way in a professional situation, especially if they're those little niggling comments, which some might be being made that maybe other people in the room don't catch. That's how I would suggest to bring someone into that, and it kind of makes it an independent position, and then they can. It's a lot easier to then spot, and so that would be my advice on that situation there. But of course, if it's blatant, it should be called out very, very quickly. That's just a respectful thing to do. Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks for the question, Sally. Look, we've run out of time. I do appreciate everyone and your time, and I am mindful that we've got about 1 minute. So I'm going to share my screen just with some things to finalize this. Please do take a quick snapshot of our webinar survey. We would love to hear what you think. Did we hit this nail on the head? Is there more that you want to hear about? Are there any other topics you'd like us to talk about in our webinars in this free series, and things that we'd like to hear from us for 2026, because we are actually pulling the calendar together for what 2026 is going to look like. Yes, I know, and we're only in July. It's scary that we are actually in July, and it's only 5 months till Christmas. So if you weren't feeling a little bit panicked by what the date is, just letting you know that, please please fill in our survey. We'd love to hear what you think. I am going to move on now because I'm mindful of the time and we have hit 7:30. And then finally, if you are not a member with Women for STEM and you would like to become a professional member, please do have a look at this QR code and you can use our member code MEM79, all caps 79. For a $79 membership instead of our full price. We'd love to see you at many, many more of our events. And then just on that note, I will stop sharing the screen now so that we can see all of our amazing panelists again. Just a quick reminder for everybody, please check out the Women for STEM website. We are womenforstem.com.au, that is the number 4. We have some amazing events coming up. If you are unaware, have a look at those. We do have our own Chris Skipper Conway, who's going to be on a panel where we are looking at the WGEA report, how to actually set your workplace up for the future. So that is going to be an amazing event that's going to be held by at Robert Half Business Centre at Rialto. So that's going to be a really, really good event. Those tickets have just gone on sale. So if you want to get prime position, please go in and get yourself a ticket for that event. We also have a lot of free events that are coming up. Thank you all very much for coming. I would love to thank Amit, Ray and Sony. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed that. And Sony, it was so good to see all of your family on the call. It was great. I love the support, the family support. Thank you all. Take
Thank you,
care. Have a
everyone.
Thank
great
very
you.
week.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.